Lori, are you ready?
Say again?
Are you ready for me to go ahead and make our introduction?
Uh, yes, but I haven't. Let's see. It's the double. I need to find Kelly Barrett again. There she is. I'm making Kelly the host. So, Kelly, you are now the host, but our programs director, Lori Francis, is going to introduce you here. Um, and I turn it over to Lori.
Well, Kelly, we're so glad to have you with us today. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of your subject and then give a little biographical background on you. Kelly's going to
Sounds
share
great.
with us a quick and dirty guide for reading old handwriting and script. Decoding old handwriting can feel like cracking a secret code, but with the right tools, you can master it. This lively session strips away the mystery and gives you practical, proven techniques to more confidently read letters, records, and documents written decades or even centuries ago. You'll learn how to recognize tricky letter forms, spot common handwriting quirks, and discover reliable resources to turn to when you hit a scribbly brick wall. Whether you're a genealogist, historian, or curious reader of the past, this session will help you bring old words back to life. And I would like to say that some of it looks like a foreign language. So these will be tips on helping us figure these out. Kelly is a professional researcher, writer, and certified master trainer. Her genealogy journey began in childhood. Family stories of suspicious name changes, disappearances, cattle rustling, and other mysteries sparked her imagination and a lifelong passion for family history. Following a successful career in human resources, she turned her skills in investigation, analysis, and documentation toward finding lost relatives, solving family mysteries, and breaking through brick walls. And we can follow Kelly's genealogy adventures in her blog, Jaunts and Junkets, and learn more by visiting her website, which is www.ancestor-hunter.com. That's ancestor-hunter.com. Kelly, we're so glad to have you with us. We'll turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to share this presentation. It is one of my absolute favorites.
Hey,
And
Kelly,
hopefully today,
Kelly, I need to interrupt you here just for a
yes?
second. Apparently, our we didn't hit. I didn't hit the right button to record to the cloud. So can you try to hit record to the cloud for me? You know where that is?
No, but I'm looking right now.
I thought I recorded it, but well, it says it's recording up in the upper. Uh, that's okay.
Okay.
I think we're good to go. It says it's recording. So
Okay, great. Great. And hopefully everyone has a copy of the handout as well. It contains a lot of the resources and bullet points of what we're going to cover today. Um, so thank you for the very kind introduction. And like I said, I'm really excited to be here and share some tips and tricks for reading old handwriting and script. And we will talk about foreign languages as well as English. Let's see here. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to take a quick look at some common factors that impact the readability of the document that you have. We'll talk about some handwriting characteristics and really what can make some of that really difficult to make out. And then we're going to look at two vastly different approaches to the problem of reading old handwriting and script and talk about really two ends of the spectrum, the quick and dirty approach versus the very thorough approach. And one may be right for you, but may not be right for someone else. And that's okay. It really depends on what your research goals are and your situation. And then my goal today is to give you a lot of tips and tools and resources so that you can walk out of this today with at least something new. And we will talk specifically about something I have dubbed the Blanche Dubois method. And there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So let's dive right in.
Kelly,
Let
we
me give
lost
you
you
the
just for a second, but you're back with us now.
Okay, let me give you the bad news first. There is absolutely no magic pill, not even AI, that can take something like what you see on the screen and with 100% accuracy make it clean and crisp and legible and translate it into English and give you the information you need. There is nothing available today that can do that 100%. So that's the bad news. That's why we're talking today and going to talk about really the focus will be on tips and tools and resources to help you go from what you see on the screen to information that you can then include in your family history. On the screen now, you see a lot of the common factors that impact the readability of the documents that you are looking at. It could be a physical issue, such as what type of paper the original authors used, the ink and the writing instruments that they used. Sometimes the ink bled through. You may have that iron gall spotting that you've probably seen on old documents, or there could have been environmental factors that impacted the documents, water or fire damage. We've probably all seen, for example, records from the Personnel Center in St. Louis that were damaged by smoke and fire. So you, having looked at some of those, you probably can easily recognize how documents can become hard to read because of that. Insects, rodents could have gotten into the documents and caused damage. Even having documents stored long term in the wrong conditions can impact readability and the fragility of the document itself. And don't even get me started on reproduction or digitization issues. If you've been doing this a while and using internet-based records, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Where records that you're looking at a scan that was done or microfilm and it's out of focus, or there are dark spots that you can't read, the contrast was wrong. And there was a case recently where I was researching death records before death certificates in the state of Washington, and I was looking at a record collection online, and I was going through record by record, not just looking at a certain page. There was no index. And got to near the end of the record set, and it was clear that the person who had scanned the records had taken a stack of the records, had them probably in their hands or sitting on a table, and the stack got knocked over and the papers went askew, and they just picked them up by groups of papers and just, rather than scanning them individually, scanned like a bunch of them at the time. And so you didn't know what was front and what was back or what order they were in. And some of them weren't scanned at all. It was just a mess. So hopefully you don't encounter anything like that. It can be very frustrating. Other factors that impact readability, have to do with the time period when the record was created. Vocabulary could have been different. They might be using terms you're not familiar with that we don't use anymore. The handwriting, obviously, very different. Abbreviations might be different. For example, the old abbreviation for Washington, where I happen to be today, was WN, not WA like we know it today. And that sometimes causes some confusion with people. Um, and then, of course, we get into the impact of the author of the document, their actual handwriting, their spelling or grammar, which, in years past, you're probably aware those things were very fluid. Even the spelling of names. They may have made errors. The speed at which they wrote really impacted how legible or readable that handwriting was. And then we get into the issue of foreign languages and some records. For example, some of the old records from, let's say, Alsace-Lorraine could be in a combination of languages. They might be in Latin. If they were church records, they might be mostly in Latin, but they could also have part of the record in French or German. So it can make it very difficult to read if you only know one of those languages or none. All right, so those are some of the common factors. We're not going to focus on all of these today, but we are going to focus specifically on handwriting. And on the screen right now, you see some of the characteristics when we talk about handwriting or handwriting analysis. These are some of the things the professionals, not just genealogists, but for example, forensic document examiners will look at. They'll look at how far apart the words are spaced, the letters are spaced, slant or slope at which the person writes. And fast writing is different than slow writing and can change things like spacing and slant or slope, etc. The pen position, so how the person holds the pen impacts their writing. Use of capitalization, which is a very unique thing and again, very fluid. Use of embellishments. Think about, super fancy handwriting in the past or junior high school girls that make little hearts over the letter I, or something like that. Those would be embellishments. And again, it changes, it's different from person to person and changes at different points in someone's life. Legibility changes, for example, as we age, sometimes as we become elderly, based on physical condition, our handwriting can degrade and it's not what it was earlier in our life. Use of punctuation, again, something that can be very fluid and change and isn't necessarily set. And then the proportion of the letters, the capital letters versus the small letters, is also a distinguishing factor. So if you take all of these together for a single person, you can identify their specific handwriting and sometimes the time of their life that they're in when they wrote the document. There are three basic principles that forensic handwriting and analysts will use. So these are really three of their fundamental principles that all equate to no two persons' handwriting are the same. You can distinguish between, for example, a person actually should have written the check, their handwriting, and a forger's handwriting. Number one is that no two skilled writers have exactly the same handwriting features. Number two, every writer has a range of natural variation in his or her writing. Think of your own. And if you don't believe this, if you have a bunch of canceled checks, go back, look at the signature on your personal canceled checks. Is it 100% the same every time? The answer is going to be no, unless you're using a stamp or you're tracing your signature. There is natural variation. And then the third basic principle really that applies more for these forensic examiners is that no writer can exceed his or her skill level. If you have basic writing skills, you're not going to be able to become a master forger. It just doesn't work like that. So no two persons' handwriting are the same. If you have enough samples from the person, you will be able to tell if another sample was written by the same person. All right, I promised you two vastly different approaches to analyzing handwriting. On one end of the spectrum, we have quick and dirty. How do I get the information I need really fast so I can move on to other things? On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the slow and thorough, methodical method of looking at handwriting and being able to read it. On the quick and dirty side, basically all we're trying to do is glean the basic facts. For example, when was the person born and who were their parents? In this approach, rather than educating ourselves and becoming an expert on this, we want to be able to leverage or harness the knowledge and skills of other people. It's a quick approach, but here's the warning. It is incomplete. You're focused on getting basic facts. And sometimes the most interesting information, the clues to our ancestry are actually in other parts of that document. For example, thinking about birth records in Germany or Switzerland in the 1800s. You could look at a record and say, okay, I just want to know when my great grandfather was born. Here's the record, here's the birth date, and here's the place. Great, got it. I can move on. But there could be other information in that recorded document. It could give you clues to the social standing of your ancestor. For example, what was his father's job? You may not already have that information. If you're only gleaning the basic facts, you're only going to find out the birth date and where, maybe the parents' names. You may not be paying attention to the rest of it, where you learn about what the father does, where exactly the family lives in this area, etc. If you take a more slow and thorough approach, again, this is on the opposite end of the spectrum, you can discover those overlooked clues and details that can really enrich your family story. And this also requires you to build your own set of skills and your own knowledge of reading handwriting for that particular point in time, or reading records in that point in time. This can be very, very time consuming, but also very, very personally rewarding through your growth and development. There is no one right way to do this. You may be on one end or the other. You could be somewhere in the middle. Here are some of the things that you would want to consider as you pick out which approach to take. How much time do you have to get the answers that you're looking for? How much are you willing to spend on this? What's your interest? Maybe you have absolutely no interest in learning to write fractor script or to read fractor script. You would rather pay someone else to do that for you, or do this really quickly and just ask someone to help you and to do it. You may have physical health issues that could preclude you from being able to, let's say, travel to an archive somewhere in Bavaria all by yourself. That just may not be in the cards for you anymore. And then, of course, if you are going for certification or accreditation, and this is a record you're going to use as part of your submission, you will have to fully transcribe the document yourself. And not just the high points, you will have to transcribe every single word. So that's a different skill set than just that could impact which approach you take. All right, so let's take a look at the steps we want to take, regardless of the approach. So the first thing we would need to do is get to know the language. even if you're doing this in a quick and dirty way, you need to be able to recognize the language so that you can target the right assistance to help you figure out what that handwriting says. The easiest way to do that, there are two steps. One is to start to recognize special letters, like these examples of special characters on the screen right now. Do you recognize what language this document might be in if you saw any of these letters? I'll give you a second to think about that. All right. If you said English, you would be right. So these three letters are archaic. They're obviously no longer used today. They're the thorn, the win, and the F. Um, the thorn is the one you may be the most familiar with, chances are. The thorn, when you see it written, it looks like what you see on the screen. It can look like a Y, although the loop on this one is going the other way. And then this one has the little E up above. If we today were to pronounce this, we would say, oh, it's ye. Think about those places you've been, if you've ever been to England, or I think there's a ye old curiosity shop in Seattle, at least there used to be. um, we would pronounce it ye old this, ye old that. But the letter is actually, the letter is actually a version of the thorn, and it would be pronounced like th. It should be pronounced the old curiosity shop. Just a fun fact there. The win, the win, another letter no longer used, and the F as well. We won't get into the details, not what we're here to do today. All right, but the main point here is that you need to be able to recognize any special characters in the language in question. So if you don't want to learn Czech or German or French, you still should be able to recognize some of those special characters. If there's a lot of umlauts, those two dots over vowels, that's probably a German. It's either German or a German related language. There are other special characters and used in French and other languages. So you should become familiar with those special letters. So just so that you can recognize what language you're dealing with. On the slow and thorough side, by contrast, experts will tell you if you want to learn to write in a language, you can do it. Think about how you originally learned cursive. I'm assuming, based on the makeup of your group, that probably most of you learned to write cursive maybe in about third grade is when you started learning cursive handwriting. How did you learn cursive? Well, you learn to write. Generally, the way they taught us was we learned to write before we could actually read cursive. Um, Remember, I know in my school we had the alphabet letters posted all along above the chalkboards in the classroom. And we had to sit there, and when they taught us to make a new letter or how to join letters, we had to use that lined paper. It was like a brown paper that was wider than it was tall, and we had to write first the letters, then we practiced writing little poems or sayings. And maybe we had flashcards that we used at home to help us study. That's how most of us learned to write cursive. We learned to write it before we could actually read the language. For many of us, we learned what was called the Palmer method. This is an example of the Palmer method on the screen. And it was very popular until the 80s. Its main competition here in the United States was the Zehner-Bloser alphabet. Chances are if you grew up here in the United States, you before the 1980s, you learned one of these two methods. I know that the method I learned was the Palmer method. And the reason I can tell the difference is the letter Q. I remember distinctly learning to write a cursive Q that was very, very similar to the number two, as you can see on here. And again, let me show you the Zahner-Bloser method. This one looks like more of a printed Q for the cursive. So chances are you learned one of these two methods. Later on, um, I think they came up with this in the late 1970s and it started gaining momentum. This was a simplified method called the Danielian method. And again, the Q looks like the number two, but it does not have all of the loops and things of the other method that I showed you, the Palmer method. And the whole point of having cursive was to have a way of writing here that was faster. And it was faster to write in cursive than it was to print. Of course, there's individual variation in that. And for some of us, cursive might be more difficult for us to write and we take more time. But in general, the point of cursive was to make something that was faster. And studies have shown that, in fact, that is the case, that cursive is faster to write than to print out letters in all languages except one, and that was French. This is an example of a letter that my cousin wrote our grandmother in the 70s. My cousin is French, and this is what it looked like. And it was the one language that they studied where cursive actually took longer than just to print. And you can kind of see why here. I treasure this. I have my grandmother's things, and this is amongst them. And I just treasure this letter. All right, things did get very complicated in some languages. This is an example of the alphabet in Fracture. With Fracture, though, it was primarily used in print materials rather than handwriting. You can see the letters are very complicated. They're beautiful. But if you are studying, say, German language records, you don't need to be able, if you want to do the quick and dirty method, you don't have to be able to print all of this. You just need to be able to recognize by picking out maybe a few symbols or letters, so that if you see those, you'll know you're dealing with Fracture. All right, recently, here's a great example of how this can help. Last year, I was looking for postcards and came across this one on eBay. This was for a different project, and came across this postcard that shows the Mineral Springs Hotel. And I think my brain, I don't think I'd had enough coffee maybe that day. And I was having a dickens of a time trying to read the postcard. And I couldn't figure out. It took me a couple, I don't know, maybe a couple of minutes to figure out what the problem was and why couldn't I read this postcard that was clearly from the Mineral Springs Hotel. It was from the early 1900s, mailed in the United States. Why couldn't I read this? And then I took a closer look and noticed the way that capital H was written. Then I noticed this unusual looking B that isn't actually a B, but I recognized those letters. And then I looked, and the very first word written on the postcard was the word Lieber. So probably many of you in the room have already recognized this wasn't in English. That was my challenge. Was I had it in my mindset because of where the postcard was mailed and what it was about, that this would be in English. And no, this is German. This is very clearly German, and I can tell that by select words and by special characters, the way things are written. All right, here's another one. Let's see, I've got that blown up. Okay, here's another example of script. I can't read this. Maybe some of you can. It is very difficult to read unless you recognize that this is shorthand. Again, something we don't often see today. So, knowing those special characters can really help. Maybe you can recognize it, but you can't translate it, but we'll get to how you can get that translated. This is Greg shorthand and basically says you are very welcome to come. This was an invitation to something. I think it was a reunion, actually. All right, so on the quick and dirty side, just to summarize, to get to know the language, you recognize a few special letters, maybe a few key words. For example, I'm not fluent in reading Latin, but I can look at a baptism record or a marriage record, etc. And within seconds, I can tell you if it's in Latin or not because of a few key words. For example, the way they write the date in those records. Okay, quick and dirty. On the slow and thorough side, we said we first have to learn to write the language. Then we learn to read the language. Oh my gosh, how are we going to do that? Well, one of the resources available would be a foreign language word list. There are a lot of these out there. Some are better than others. I'm not here to provide a discussion of which ones are great, but I do want to point out a few. The Family Search genealogical word list, they have so many of these. You can see a list on the screen of the various languages. And of course, this could change and they could always add more. Most of the languages I know in my family that I would be interested in having word lists for, they do have those available. Hopefully they have the ones available that you need as well. And of course, Family Search is free. You just need an online free account and you can go in there and you can download these word lists. This is what they might look like. These are a couple of examples, Polish and Latin. They're usually multiple pages long, often downloadable PDFs. And then they also, as you go through the Family Search website, they also will have other helpful links, such as discussions of handwriting. They have lessons in their uh, I don't remember what it's called, but they do have a section of the website where they have lessons you can take, and they have a lot of lessons on reading um, the script or the handwriting or paleography of various foreign languages. So, highly encourage you if you have not already done so and you need to dive into records that are in a foreign language. This should be one of your first stops to gather up the resources that might help. Another great resource that is sometimes overlooked is Thomas McKinty's genealogy research log. This is something he offers for free on the Genealogy Bargains website. And it is in an Excel table, as I recall. It's called the Genealogy Research Log because that's the primary purpose. But he does have he has a worksheet that contains certain genealogy terms translated using Google. Into various languages. So this is a great resource if you need additional help or want a quick spreadsheet to help you translate English, French, German, for example. This is a great resource. So I highly encourage you to go in and download this for free. I also encourage you to invest in a really good dictionary if there is one. And I don't mean just your standard college dictionary of German. because if you're looking at old records, it's not going to have a lot of the words that you need. Now, I don't have a list of all of the great dictionaries in all of the languages, but I can highly, highly recommend this dictionary, Ernest Toda's German English Genealogical Dictionary, if you are looking at records that are in German, because there are a lot of archaic terms in this book. And when I was taking a class from the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy on writing old German script and fractor. This was one of the books that was recommended, and I bought it and used it extensively, translating old German records, especially when it came to things like jobs. Um, there are a lot of archaic words in here. It was just so helpful. So invest in a good dictionary, a genealogical dictionary, if one exists. And I would recommend doing a good, quick Google search to see if you can find one for your language of interest. Okay, so learn to write, learn to read, and finally, regular practice. Practice doesn't will never make perfect. Okay, because even the experts won't agree on the translation of some difficult, or not translation, that either, but when transcribing old documents, there are sometimes rather passionate arguments between experts on whether a letter was an A or an E, how something is spelled. Um, Regular practice will make improvement, but it can't make perfect. And um, I can tell you from personal experience, having at one time been able to very successfully um, being able to transcribe something like old German script. If you don't use those skills consistently, your skill level does drop off very quickly. So you have to maintain it through regular practice. If you're interested, one great course that will help you practice, especially early colonial and early American records, would be NGS's Reading Old Handwriting course. I think this course has 10 modules, has lots of practice opportunities with the answers. And if you're a member of NGS, you do get a discount for that program. So for early American records, this would be the place to go to get practice. BYU offers a lot of online script tutorials for free. You can see the languages listed on the right of the screen. Again, these are free. There is great information. It's great practice opportunities. And I highly encourage you, if you're looking for one of those languages, to go to their website and check it out. This is an example that comes from their tutorial for Portuguese. And you can see one of the things they offer are comparisons like this one of from real documents what the letter Z looked like. And you can see there's a great variability. But tools like this can be really, really helpful if you are trying to translate something or transcribe something, sorry, from the Portuguese. You could look at this and compare it to the letter you're having a hard time making out, and it can really help you identify, is that a Z or not? One more archive I want to point out. This is a tutorial on paleography from the National Archives, not the one here in the United States. This is in Britain. Their National Archives has this tutorial that covers approximately the 1500s to 1800s English handwriting. And I love this site, but I want to caution you, it is on an archived part of the archives website. So it can be a little challenging to get to. I do have the link there for you. It is still there. It is wonderful. And one of the things that I really love about this site is that they offer, I can't remember, maybe about 10 different examples that they have fully transcribed. So you can transcribe it yourself and go through the tutorial, transcribe it yourself, and then compare it to the actual answers. This document that you see is from the early 16th century. And if you are doing records research in the 1500s to, again, the 1800s, and their English records, and you're struggling with handwriting, you may want to go through this tutorial and build up your skills to help you read those records. Here's an example of what the letters might look like, and take a look at Y, the letter Y with the loop that goes backwards. We now know what that is. Okay, so we've covered how to get to know the language, the quick and dirty way, and the slow and thorough way. Now, what do we do? Well, I'm going to recommend to you the Blanche Dubois method. And probably some of you recognized her name as soon as I said it. This comes from the film A Streetcar Named Desire. And I think probably the most recognized line from that movie and Blanche Dubois is when she said, "I have always depended on the kindness of strangers." And that is the key then to the quick and dirty method. In the Blanche Dubois method, you identify the language and the type of document. Okay, we can do that. We've done the steps. Identify the time period and the location. For example, this is the 1600s in England. It's in English. It's a baptismal record. What you're going to do with that information is target the most appropriate Facebook group and post a request with a copy of the document on Facebook to that group, making your request very short and sweet. People don't need to know all about your ancestors. Most people don't want to know. What they want to do is they're looking for a practice opportunity, and they want to jump in there and practice their skills so that they can keep their skills set up. And so they don't need a lot of background, just the basics. And if at all possible, provide a link to the full document, because often what people will need to do is go to that page, look at other handwriting on that page or the page before or after to be able to figure out what certain letters are. And then submit only one item to one group at a time. A lot of people belong to multiple groups. And if they see you posting the same thing to multiple groups, some of them will call you out on it, and they will, the administration may delete your request to their group because you've already posted it somewhere else. Now, some of you are probably saying, "Kelly, I don't do Facebook, and I'm not going to do Facebook." Okay, that's fine. I personally, I'm not the hugest fan of Facebook, but for genealogy research, it can be extremely helpful. And if you're not doing it or you don't want to do it, you probably know someone, a friend or a family member, or someone sitting in the room with you who does do Facebook, and they can perhaps help you with this and put it on their account. There are a lot of helpful Facebook groups out there. You can see a few on the screen. There are some great groups geared specifically for reading old handwriting or deciphering script. There are language specific groups. You would just want to do a search and target the kind of group that you'd be looking for, what language, genealogy, ancestry, etc., and find a group that has a significant number of people in it, and join that group and then post your message. Let's take a look at a quick example that comes from one that was posted to Facebook. In this example, before I give you what the person said, I want to just show you quickly what the record looks like. And they didn't include the entire record. So this kind of made it difficult. If this was all you were given, can you read this entire line? Well, you probably can read Kentucky, and there's a check mark and then a slash in one of the boxes, and then something written over there. Well, that's the something that the person had a question about. This is what the person wrote. Trying to figure out what the word is in the last column. This is from the 1850 census under the column that says whether deaf and she means deaf or deaf, sorry, and dumb, blind, insane, idiotic, pauper, or convict. Everything else on the page is perfectly legible, but this word, which looks like joke it to me. Okay, so what do you think? Taking a look at this, I can see how she could see joke it or jacket, something like that, but that doesn't really make sense, does it? For the column, she's actually almost entirely answered her own question. And using a script generator, which I will show you when we get to the end of this, I typed in the word idiot based on what she said the column said. And it does look very similar to what is circled on the screen. So in this case, I used a tool called a font generator and just tried it out. And there you go. Easy way to solve the problem very, very quickly. All right, here's another quick example. I see these on Facebook all the time where individuals will post part of a death certificate and say, can anybody tell me what the cause of death was or the contributory cause? And here's what they were asking for. And here are their guesses or various guesses that people submitted to this request. Okay. Think about that for a second. Is it any of those? Well, are any of those actually causes of death? Well, the plague would be, but I don't think it really looks like plague. So, how can we answer this question very quickly without submitting it onto a Facebook group? Well, in this case, the answer is Le Grippe, um, uh, which is basically a French word for the flu. But there is a simpler way for causes of death than to post them on Facebook, which some people do, I honestly get a little annoyed with, because this is something that is so easy for you to figure out yourself. So you see this handwritten 11A on the death certificate. Well, that refers to a classification of disease from the International Classification of Diseases. This is now in its, I don't know, 11th, 12th version. And now it is produced by the World Health Organization. This originally started back in the late 1800s because people were wanting and governments were wanting to start gathering some data about the causes of disease. So they came up with this classification and it has changed over the years. Okay, so I think now we're in 11 or 12. And the first revision, it originally started in the 1890s, but revision one is officially from 1900. And you can see that every decade or so, they have put out a revised version. The key to having success with this is to find the version of the book that immediately preceded the death of the person on your death certificate. So, and you can look it up and find out exactly what that number stands for, and voila, you have your cause of death. There are two places you can look for this. One is the Oak Ridge website, and I believe both of these are on your handout. One of the things I like about using the Oak Ridge website is that you can download a CSV file, so a data file of all of that year's classification. So you can just have it handy. You don't have to have internet access to be able to look something up. So back to this death certificate with the number 11A, we need to know when the death occurred. And this death occurred in 1930. So again, to find the right version of the book, we need to go to the one that immediately preceded the death. That would be 1929, revision 4. So we would go to the 1929 version, which is available on the website. And then we can type in 11A, and it comes up with influenza with respiratory complications. And that was the actual cause of death. Now, of course, when I did this example, I picked the only one I have found so far, where there is a typo, and they use the letter L in, yeah, it's a letter L, I think. It's a lowercase L rather than the number 1 for 11. Okay, but other than that, you would just type in the number, for example, 72, and it would come up with the correct cause of death. So easy for you to do on your own. Wolfbane Cybernetic is another place where you can get this information, and you can download also through this website, and it's really super easy to look things up as well. And it will give you the same information. So here's another example of a death certificate. And if we were to look that up, it gives us information about this cause of death, and that this individual had arteriosclerosis. All right, so super easy to use. And this is a photo of the individual. This is my second great grandfather. This was his death certificate. And there was another interesting thing about this death certificate that I wanted to point out. There are two dates, or so, no, sorry. There's the death date and the birth date, two dates on this death certificate. And we probably all have been cautioned in the past about taking something like a birth date as gospel when we find it on a death certificate that happened decades afterwards, and the witness probably wasn't present at the birth, so they're not necessarily the best source of information. There was another problem with this death certificate, though, and that's why it's important to examine documents carefully. When this death certificate came into my possession, it was a photocopy of the death certificate. So black and white photocopy, and was possibly even a photocopy of a photocopy. But it was the only document that had been found that had the individual's birth date listed like this. And so that was great. And family had gone with that and included that specific birth date in their records for his birth. Well, upon closer examination, I looked at another word on this death certificate that also started with the capital M, the word male. Anybody notice anything about those two capital letters? Okay, you probably noticed that they are different in a number of ways, including how heavy the person was, the ink was laid onto the paper, the curvature at the beginning, the way the bottom of the letter lines up with the line. These were clearly written by two different people. the short story on this is that I contacted the health department, and the woman at the health department looked up what they had in their records, and the actual death certificate does not contain a date of birth. That line is blank. Some relative at some point in time had written on there this date of birth and then passed on photocopies to other people. So there you go. Important lesson for us all. Another quick resource I wanted to point out is Rudy's List. I love Rudy's List. Rudy's List is archaic medical terms in a number of languages. You can see a bunch of them listed on the screen. If you do not have this downloaded somewhere on your computer, I highly recommend you go and grab it. Now, there is a problem. Rudy's List is no longer live. What you will often see are these two links here at the bottom. Do not write these down because those are not the active correct sites. The Rudy's List, I don't know. I don't know the story there. I don't know if Rudy's still with us or just stopped updating or the website's changed. But I did find this the actual document on a website called herbalhistory.org, and you can see the link there. You have to scroll halfway down the page, and it's kind of in the middle, and it's kind of difficult to see, but there is a place where you can download Rudy's List. I suggest you go do it today if you want a copy, because who knows when it'll go away. And if you may be saying, well, but Kelly, we can go to Wayback Machine and pull it up. Yeah, you actually can't get the whole thing on the Wayback Machine. So I definitely recommend going to Herbal History and pulling that, because this is an amazing document. It's super long, but so comprehensive. All right, a few additional tips. As we learned from my death certificate example, always examine other documents written by the same person or lines within the same document. If you're struggling to read someone's handwriting and it's on a census, for example, go to the page before, the page after. Build your own lettering guide that shows this is the way this person writes A's and B's and C's. That will help you be able to read that scribe's handwriting. Identify any boilerplate language. For example, thinking back to those baptism records in Germany or France or Italy, wherever you're from, or your family is from, they probably contain boilerplate language that you will see over and over consistently. If you can identify that language and understand what it means, it will help you very quickly to identify at least the pieces in that record that are most important to you. Another trick that can seriously help if you're struggling with some words in a document is just stop. Just walk away, come back to it later. Sometimes looking at it upside down can help. This has actually helped me identify writing on headstones as well, that you could not read the normal way by if I can't read it that way, if it's problematic, sometimes what I will do is I will walk around to the other direction, and read it from the other direction, so I'm looking at it upside down, and sometimes, believe it or not, it becomes 100% clear. I don't know why. It just has to do with how our brains and our eyes work together. Another great tip is to organize a small group of friends to work on transcribing together. Or maybe there are several of you in your group that are all interested in translating German records. You could get together this little group and practice together. But keep in mind, practice makes improvement, not perfect. Few other quick tips. One is to make it larger. This definitely helps me. I have problems with my eyesight, so I have to make things really big sometimes to make out what those letters are. Also, tracing it with my finger in the air or pretending to write it in the air can help me identify what the letter is. Some people use reverse imaging so that black becomes white, white becomes black. That can make things more legible. Um, Sometimes holding up a yellow transparent sheet in front of something is particularly if you're looking at microfiche or microfilm, that can help. Filtering out that yellow can help make things more legible. And someone inevitably is going to ask, well, what about just using AI? Can't I just use AI? Absolutely, you can. But here's the thing, AI is not perfect. And you are still, even if you use AI, whether it's ChatGPT or the AI that's in beta testing on Ancestry, you still have to go through word for word and make sure that the AI tool has transcribed that document word for word correctly because it makes errors. And then you'll have to fix those. In fact, I'm in Pro Gen 70 right now, and one of the assignments that we're working on, well, this month the assignment is on transcription and abstraction, and one of my fellow um, overachieving genealogists who's in the program, he's already finished this month's assignment, and part of the assignment was to, once you did all of your transcription, was to go and plug it into an AI and see what the AI came up with. And his overall response was that it would be quicker for him to just do it himself rather than trying to use AI and then having to go back through and verify every single word that AI did because there were numerous errors in what AI did. So it's getting there, but you cannot rely on it solely to solve all of your transcription issues with handwriting. A few more other suggestions. One is if you really want to dive deep, take institute courses related to the language that you're interested in. Oftentimes, these will have a module or two on paleography, and then there are also sometimes classes just on reading um, script in a certain language. So lots of opportunities coming up in all three of the major institutes. Another great resource, NGS Magazine put out a special issue back in 2024 just on handwriting, has some great articles and resources available. It is available in their magazine archive. So if you're a member, you can get this for free. Couple favorite books here I wanted to share with you as well. This is if you're interested in colonial or early American handwriting. Both of these books you see on the screen, or there are three books on the screen, really great books and should probably be part of your library if you are learning to decipher these records for yourself. If you're doing other languages, French, German, Latin, or Spanish, there are two resources. These are two of my absolute favorites on the screen. Also, that genealogy dictionary that I mentioned earlier, that's again something you should have if you're trying to translate records. Okay, two quick bonus resources for today, font generators. This one, this is a great one where you can type the text you see up at the near the top. I wrote in, hello, my name is Kelly, and then I selected which script from the 8 options I wanted to see that in. And so for short words, phrases, sentences, this is a great way to look at different scripts to see what something would look like to help you identify the thing that you're looking at in a document to see, okay, is that is that really what I think it is? This can really be a helpful tool. And you see the URL down at the bottom. Okay. And the second one, this is a website where you can purchase historical fonts. I love this website. It has a lot of fonts available. You can actually purchase these fonts for download. You don't have to, though, if you have a short word or phrase that you want to see in old fonts, what old handwriting might look like. You can see an example here on the screen. One of the fun things about the website is it makes the font, it puts the font on what looks like old paper. So it's just fun. And I just love the way they made the H. They made that German looking H there for Hunter. So again, the URL is on the screen. You can play with this for free. You don't have to purchase anything, and it gives you a way to type in what you think something might say, look at it in different fonts, and get a good feel for if you're correct or not. All right, so here's what we covered today. We looked at common factors that impact readability. We talked about the characteristics of handwriting that set one person apart from another. And then we talked about two vastly different approaches to the problem. You've got the quick and dirty way, which leverages the knowledge and skills of other people, or you can do the slow and thorough way and really develop your own knowledge and skills and really become sort of your own expert on whatever it is. And then we've gone through a lot of tips and tools and resources out there to help you along the way. And with that, I would like to open it up to any questions.
Got one question here.
I've got one. In the transition from UK into the colonial period, do you see an eventual transition in the style of handwriting around 200 years from England?
Could somebody repeat the question? I couldn't hear it.
Do I need to cut off?
Yeah, go ahead. Go up there, Bill.
Yeah, in the transition from the colonial period from England, do you see a distinct difference in the style of handwriting from Britain into America evolve? Or is it just
I
kind
think
of slow?
so. It really, it has to do with where people were educated.
Okay.
So originally, our forefathers who came over would have been using the same script that they learned growing up. So it was only through the course of changing of generations that handwriting would have started to shift. I would say, knowing, us and our spirit as Americans, we would have wanted, as we went forward, there would have been slight changes. Things went out of favor or out of style, and so things would have changed. So if I were studying early like colonial records, I would specifically be looking, if I wanted to boost my skills, I'd look for resources available for those early colonial records, but also records available or tutorials available for English handwriting at that point in time too. Just so I don't miss anything. And if we're looking at other groups of people, it's important to know, for example, if we're looking at a little bit later, revolutionary times, looking at what were called the Pennsylvania Germans, they were still they were using a German script and were writing in often in German. Um, so if you're looking at church records or letters or things, they could very well be written here in the United States, but in German using a German script. So it's really important to be able, as I mentioned at the beginning, to identify the time period and the location and the type of record it was to be able to help you find information or to request help from the right people.
Okay. And one other question, as long as I'm up here. That website for the font generator, the first one appeared to be German by the URL,
Yes,
but it applies
yes.
to anything, or is that just,
It
does it apply to
so
any
it
language?
here, let me show you again. Um, let me see. Where are we? Okay. So this one, yeah, that is a German website. Hopefully you can see that.
Mhm.
You can type in any language where you put in the text near the top. So right at the top left corner, it says text. Obviously, I typed in using English. If I was actually looking at old German records, I would have typed in what I thought it said in German. But you are correct. It is a German URL.
Kelly, this is Laurie. Are there font or script generators for other languages, say Spanish or French or even Latin?
There could be. The ones that I use are the two that I showed you. This one for German fonts, because I do have a lot of family ancestors in that part of the world. And then the one for that I use primarily for early American type records, which is, let me show you again, this one, the old fonts that you could use for English or really American fonts. Um, there could be others. I'm not familiar with them.
Oh, thank you. And then I had one other question. Are there regional differences? Specifically, I'm wondering about the Deep South in the United States, where so many of the people maybe were Spanish or French, Acadian. Are the handwriting styles that you see there, are they different from the colonial Northwest?
That is a fantastic question. And of course they are, just to make things more difficult, right? So when we're talking about, colonial America, we typically think of English records and people who came over from England but when you're talking about a place like Louisiana, you're talking about French influences, and the French influences still influence that part of the world today, especially in the legal realm. Um, and a lot of old records can be in French. Also, in the very northern part of the United States, there can be old records and old letters and things in French because of the French Canadian influence. So, again, it is really important to know where the record came from and when, so that you can correctly identify what language this record is even in, and what script then people were likely to be using, so that you can get clues to help you translate that or transcribe it. So yeah, very good point. I focus on one, but you're absolutely right. There are others.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else you wanted me to go back and show on the screen?
No, I think that's about does it. I don't see any more messages in the chat for our online peoples. So, Kelly, thanks a lot for giving us this knowledge on handwriting and old scripts. We sure do appreciate it. Thank you much.
Well, thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I wish you the absolute best on all of your translation and transcription of old handwriting and script.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we've got this month. Next month, we have our genealogy help session. So if anybody submitted a request for us to try to find and break through your brick wall, that's what we're going to be trying to break down next month. That meeting will be here. I think it's on the 4th. No, not the 4th. Let me check.
Valentine's Day.
It's on Valentine's Day?
Is it too late to submit?
Yes. You're right, it's on Valentine's Day. It should be a sweet meeting.
So is that something you can watch other people's? So we got married. Is that something?
We've had.
Yeah, I know you submit stuff. Can you watch? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And.
Yeah, so thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Good day.
Look at the industry guys would work. Hold on.
Terry, Terry, do you need Leslie to hang, or did you need Kelly to hang on? Or I guess she's gone, so it's okay.
Maybe.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah. So since she was.
And then she has bundles of like.
I guess
I can't
too much. So one is,
all of that.
if you could,
Yeah, I have a few.
teacher. Be hear everything and that I'm whatever feels right. Well, they should go on and do a genealogy. Perfect. Perfect. And I've created a bunch of things, so. I'm Susie. Curtis. Yes, yeah. And then, the other question is, would you be interested in trying to do that?
So did you have?
Good, that's not really what it is, you know, like a. Some are there. To showed up and needed help on something. I mean, I know that's what research does. You know, I was brainstorming with Dennis, he thought it would be a way to. Set to Thursday, but and I would not do it every Thursday.